Hello, I'm Dion Hood from Bradford Libraries, and part of National Libraries Week, we're going to be having some small chats with people. And today I have got, well, it says on the internet, poet, author, and comedian Kate Fox. Hi, Kate.
Oh, do you know that's to be called anything like a poet or an author or a comedian or a broadcaster? It feels a bit. It feels like it belongs to another era in a weird way. I have been working throughout, but I'm only starting to do more public things again. It's just so weird. And nowadays, if you ask me what I was at the moment, I'd say I'm a sea swimmer.
So, sea swimming, that's new and unusual.
Well, you know, and a weird thing though. So I just did a festival for the BBC called the Contains Strong Language Festival, and somehow, against the odds, they decided they would carry on with this attempt to put on a spoken word and poetry festival just as the second wave was hitting in Barrow-in-Furness, which is a hotspot, bringing poets together. But somehow they did it. They managed to do it, and weirdly, every single female poet or writer involved was a sea swimmer. So there is some weird thing going on where the writers of Britain, or at least the female writers of Britain, are getting in cold water and swimming about. It's a thing.
Is it good for the kind of creative sort of juices kind of thing, get the brain going? Yeah,
honestly, I think it is. And actually, well, I would have a bit of a theory. Like maybe we were all already swimming, because I've done a lot of outdoor swimming in the last couple of years. But in order to replace the endorphins and adrenaline of live performance, which nowadays, well, 6 months ago was as much a part of being a writer as writing. I think in order to replace those endorphins, we had to do something else, and it's probably quite I don't know. There is something very meditative about swimming, full stop, and maybe even more so if you're swimming outside, wherever that is, be it in the sea or in a lake or a river. And maybe, I don't think I've quite had this theory before, but so for me to write, I need a strange combination of being stimulated and alive and awake, but kind of still and thoughtful. And those two things maybe are a bit contradictory, but writing allows you to be both awake and still, and so does swimming, although obviously moving in swimming, and probably a lot of sport does actually. You know the flow state that people talk about.
Yeah,
really into whatever you are doing, be it running or playing a game of pool or just really probably decorating or anything really where you're in the moment. That's a writing state. But yes, also lots of other states.
Yeah, because I do artwork and I find it very similar. I'm very quiet and I'm very kind of away. It takes that part of your brain, just goes away, doesn't it? But you're kind of doing this, it's a really unusual sort of phase to be in, isn't it? Yeah. So are you doing much writing at the moment?
Sort of, very much in phases, actually. So I've probably just finished a couple of. I've just sent off my next poetry collection to my publisher, so that was a relief. And I was writing a lot of poems for that, particularly over April, May, June. And then I had to rewrite a show that I'm doing that was the one the BBC just asked me to do last weekend at this poetry festival, and it's called Bigger on the Inside, and it's about, well, it's like a history of Doctor Who, autism activism, and the idea of normality in England.
Gosh.
So which actually makes it sound a bit more complicated than it is, because it's just because I just before this I was chairing a show called Where There's Muck There's Bras about northern women, and I found this format which really suits how my brain thinks. So I was able to do sort of stand up and poetry and spoken word and sharing loads of facts and sharing bits of my personal story all in a show. And having a PowerPoint backdrop helps with that, actually. And then just sort of chatting in between and not pretending that the audience isn't there. I hate that. I like to talk to the audience as I go along. And when it came to wanting to explore the idea of autism and neurodiversity, because I have an autism diagnosis as an adult, I thought, oh, well, this is a nice friendly format and you can say a lot, but in quite an accessible way. Anyway, so I've just rewritten that. And then, excitingly, shall I do this is a bit like a news announcement.
Yeah,
an exclusive.
do.
It's not, I can't quite, so basically, I'll make it sound really mysterious as well, because it has to be slightly mysterious. A publisher approached me in the past few weeks about the Where There's Muck There's Bras project. And they were like, we're sure that you must have loads of publishing interest in this project. I was like, well, don't tell them that. But we love the idea. And we, you know, would you like to? I was like, oh, I always dreamed of a publisher approaching me instead of me having to desperately try and get published. And then they made me an offer. And then I realised I definitely needed an agent. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I have a lot of friends who are writers who just have agents already. I've never had one because I've never, in poetry, you don't make any money from poetry publishing. So generally agents are not interested in you if you're not going to make them any money, obviously. But I had been talking to one a few months before. And when I told her that I was being approached by this publisher, she was like, right, yeah, I'll come on board, I'll be your agent and I'll negotiate for you. And I was like, oh, thank God. So they're still talking. They're having Zoom chats like this. So exactly, I don't know, but hopefully they're saying, give her more money, she can't afford to write it for that. So hopefully, if that all works out, I'll be sitting down writing the book of that show, and I feel quite relieved about that, to be honest, because so much of my work is live performance, and although so I'm tentatively starting to do it again, but it's not exactly currently the most certain sure thing. So and actually I've resisted. I have not felt attracted to the idea of performing on Zoom. Not really. I'm sure I'll get there. And I've not really felt attracted to doing anything much on Zoom apart from chatting to my friends. So, Dion, this is the first that I've actually said yes to since you asked me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate it because I hate Zoom and it gives me a headache. But I like the people. I just don't like the medium.
I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? It suddenly gives us so much potential access to new ways of doing things that I would always advocate for. Like, I've always loved the idea that more people than just a few would come to readings. But I can see that a lot of people don't want to, you know, go out at night and go somewhere they don't know or feel comfortable just to see a writer, even though that's actually something I love. So Zoom is opening that world up, isn't it? But on the other hand, it's quite, you have to concentrate really hard, don't you?
Yeah, it's not natural, is it? It's not natural. And I always hope that I kind of quite like using that I might reach other people that I wouldn't normally reach in the library, and then they might come into the library and go, oh, well, that's really interesting, or that person's really interesting, or it's really nice to hear a writer. So I'm kind of seeing it as a positive at the moment, though I much prefer being in a library or in a room with you know, the author or the poet. You know, I miss all that. I miss readings and stuff like that. Yeah.
actually, what we're going to get, hopefully, so we're not there yet, but when things settle down a lot, we're going to end up with the best of both worlds in a way we never would have before, won't we? Because a lot of people, maybe like you and I, who would have been a bit resistant to Zoom and we wouldn't have gone there, will actually know how it works, we'll know the benefits of it, we will happily go on and do stuff, but we will also be really happy to be doing live readings. And then people, as you say, might see someone online and come to the live reading, and they're going to feed into each other. So I don't think that would have happened as quickly as it probably will happen were it not for the current situation. So.
No, it's really good. Do you think your writing has, obviously has COVID impacted your writing, or what you're writing about, or your writing style, or how you're thinking?
Yeah, very much. Well, I had and this will not be unusual, many people had quite a horrible April and May. And I was on my own a lot, and I was ill. I think I had the virus. And my stepmom died probably of the virus. And it was just, oh God. I wouldn't especially want to have to live April and May again. But I was writing during that time. It was exactly the sort of circumstances. Well, I was going to say exactly the sort of circumstances. There were elements of it that are circumstances in which I have previously written, where maybe I feel like there's something I need to say, but it's hard to say it in any other form than a poem. And that felt like the case. Where I feel kind of isolated. That can be quite good for my writing, because it is a form for me of reaching out or communicating. And then the very practical thing of, I did have a poetry collection deadline, and maybe that somehow that was in my head, but was not somehow wasn't the primary motor. I mean, it's a funny thing. Have you heard the saying "happiness writes white"? Mm-hmm. As in, if you're happy, you'll just write boring things because you're just happy. You've got nothing to say. You've got no problem. Yeah. On the other hand, I don't agree that you have to be in a state of abject misery to be a good poet. I think abject misery is often quite bad for writing, because being miserable takes a lot of energy and takes a lot of brain space. And there are certain types of misery or anxiety in which I cannot write. But as it happens, the initial shock of the massive change of everything, and then the isolation and so on, did produce quite a lot of poems about distance. And I was probably already writing about the distance between people, but this obviously gave it another layer. Suddenly, everybody was thinking about what closeness and intimacy and distance was. And the idea that we would, it was basically illegal for me as a woman living on my own. It was illegal for me to see anybody at a time where I was ill and had a very close bereavement. That's still can't quite get my head around how that was okay. And things in this second wave are much better, because now we have support bubbles and things like that. But that wasn't a thing then. So it made my writing feel a bit more urgent to me, and had it carried more weight. However, at the same time, I'm really aware, I think a lot of people probably won't want to read anything that reminds them of this time, because it's a trauma. And because there will be a lot of writing about this time. But speaking personally, I can't wait. I can't wait for our COVID novels, our COVID non-fiction, our COVID memoir, our COVID poetry collections. I am someone who makes sense of the world by reading about it. So, yeah, bring it on. So although there was a little voice in my head going, nobody's going to want to read this, well, some people will.
I think people will, because I mean, we've just done a kind of a poetry competition thing at work, and seeing people's experiences distilled down to the individual, not just the people but people from like across Bradford from all different backgrounds. I found that really interesting, and there's so much optimism and positivity and people finding the good in what's happened, and so that actually was really, even the sad things, there was always this little bit of a glimmer of what we've learned from it and things like that. So I do like reading it, and I think lots of people will as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. And you're right, that sense of hope, which I've found it there all along, but I've more often found it in writing and reading, actually. Yeah, and I think there are so many things that will be improved, even as there are things that will never return, I suppose. We're just having to remake the world, aren't we, basically? A massive remaking, which is terrifying and exciting in equal measure. I mean, I kind of think, because we're sort of, thinking about libraries. Libraries are probably, we're already going through a time of great change, weren't they?
Yeah.
But surely it will be a lot harder now, won't it, for anybody to be able to say, oh, well, yes, but we don't need central hubs of information. I mean, and places for people to gather. Well, people might try to say that, but they'll be wrong, won't they? Do you have a sense of how libraries' roles might be shifting?
Yeah, I mean, they were already shifting in that we had to take on making sure we had things online and did things online for people who maybe couldn't access it or didn't want to, or, we had to embrace modern technology. But what we're finding is that the amount of people who say, I miss coming in, I miss touching a book, I miss being in the writers group, I miss being in the reading group. People are desperate to actually get together and talk about a book. They do a story time. So that is the thing we are all missing, and we maybe are valuing it more. I think we are valuing it more. I don't know about the decision makers, but I think your average person thinks, I want to be with other people, and I think it's really important for us. We can't live in a bubble at home with just screens.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, do you know, I felt so lucky on Sunday night. I felt like one of the luckiest people in the country, because so at this BBC Poetry Festival, I'd done my show, and then after me, there was Luke Wright, the poet, who I think you've spoken to before, and Cobbler, who is a musician, and together they did a 45-minute set that was basically Luke's poems with music underneath, kind of a slightly a rap feel, but it wasn't just rap, and Luke wasn't rapping and he wasn't singing, he was kind of speaking over a beat. And in itself, it was great just to be there at this live performance, which was really energising and fun and powerful. And I was thinking, I wish I could dance. And there were only about 20 of us, mainly BBC staff, sat in this large auditorium,
miles apart,
seating. It was very surreal, with tables, chairs around the tables, well spaced, obviously. And I was thinking, I wish I could dance. And then two women, Kate Davis, a poet from Barrow, and Jenny, who works for BBC Cumbria, just got up and started dancing. And as soon as I saw they were, I was like, and I was up, and I didn't even think about it. I didn't do the olden days thing of, will it look weird dancing in Barrow in an auditorium when there's only 20? I didn't care. I just wanted to dance. I hadn't danced for months. And we, all three of us, just danced for the rest of Luke's set. And so there's a stream of words going by, and the music, and sometimes it was really fast beat, and then sometimes it was slower. And just to do that with other people in a live setting, I thought, I will never take this for granted ever, ever again. This is a reminder, a glimpse of what is possible. It's a reminder of what the whole point of live performance is, because sometimes I'd forget, because I did take it for granted before. I'd be like, oh, there's loads of poets doing stuff. Oh, there's loads of stuff on it. Oh, we've got Netflix. Is there any point to this, really? Now I'm like, oh my God, there is so much a point. We need to be together. We need to be doing things beyond the ordinary day-to-day stuff of just eating and sleeping and working. And it's this. So I think you're absolutely right. People are desperate for that connection and that liveness. And even though it's kind of hard now, if you work in a field where that's part of what you used to do, it'll come back if we're somehow able to hang in there. I mean, I'm very lucky, actually. I'm hanging in there in various ways. You know, I've benefited from the Arts Council scheme, from a Society of Authors scheme, from the HMRC self-employment grant. I got a commission, which is all brilliant, because there was a week at the end of March where I witnessed about £10,000 of work just disappear like that, and I was like, might not be able to eat next week, which was a bit melodramatic because I did have things in the cupboard, but I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, it's very scary. But I mean, we're making plans already for how we can do events, even if they're distanced and stuff. So I think, you know, we're always looking forward. So it's really good. Yeah. Well, so Keighley then, what's your connection to Keighley then, if people who don't know?
I lived in Riddlesden from the age of about 3 to about 8, and I went to Strong Close Nursery School, and I went to St Mary's Primary School in Riddlesden. No, St Mary's First School, which I gather has now moved. I've been back and basically noticed that it wasn't there, which was a bit sad. I was like, oh, that was my school. So I think I've been back once to the site when it still was, and then once when it wasn't. And I feel quite a strong ongoing connection to Keighley, actually. And before lockdown, one of the last places that I visited, just the weekend where it became clear that lockdown was probably going to happen and everything was going really weird, I went to visit Cliff Castle, and that it was so weird how Cliff Castle Museum has lots of the same things in that I remembered from when I was about 7, and that was like 30, well, I'm 45 now, what's that, 38 years ago. So that was amazing, actually. I want to go back to Cliff Castle Museum now. It's some sort of hub of continuity in the
Strange
on Cliff Castle Museum. It's quite quirky, Cliff Castle Museum, isn't it? It's like someone's gone, yeah, we'll have a big fireplace, we'll have some birds, we'll have a weird bear thing, we'll have some pictures, we'll just put them all together randomly, and it's amazing.
Yeah. All those stuffed animals from the Victorian era, they're very strange, aren't they?
Yes. Don't be getting rid of them, Cliff Castle Museum. Keep them. Yeah. And of course, I think Keighley was quite important to me as a place, because growing up so near where the Brontes were, you're just growing up there going, oh yeah, women writers, obviously, yeah, well, that's the thing. And of course, even now, it's still sometimes harder to get on in writing as a woman. So for them to be fighting that battle so brilliantly, and for them just to be local and up the road, there's something always really wonderful about that, isn't there?
Yeah. So amazing. Yeah. So when did you start writing then? When did you sort of start thinking, oh, this is something I want to do?
In one way it was always there, and in another way it really was not something that I thought could be a job. So I would always make up daft rhymes in the car. I'm a little fly and here I go, smash into the car window, all my blood and guts pour out. It's not a very nice way for me to die, without a doubt. works of genius like that, you know. Clearly I was some sort of Mozart of the poetry world. No, but I did like doing daft rhymes and stuff. And I did that at school, and I remember saying I wanted to be either a newsreader or prime minister, and I actually became a newsreader. My version of the sensible option, given that really I wanted to be an actor or a writer or both, was to do a radio journalism diploma at Trinity and All Saints in Leeds in Horsforth. After I left university, where I did a communication and media studies degree, which again, so the natural thing for me to do would have been English, because all I did was read, really, and write. But I somehow veered away from that with this, oh no, must do the sensible thing.
Yeah.
As if being a journalist was a sensible option. It wasn't really. So I trained, became a radio journalist. The good thing about that is it taught me how to use fewer words. As you can hear, when I speak, I use many more words than I need to. But in writing, I can be quite economical, because I have to be, and that's useful as a poet. And so, yeah, radio writing was good training for that. But it took a good few years of going to comedy gigs and wishing I was doing that, and reading books and wishing I was writing them, before I just managed to find these little holes, these little niches. And actually, a particular niche for me was discovering the world of performance poetry. So that combined the things I'd wanted to do, the performing and the writing, but you could just get up and do it in a pub. You didn't need to go down to London. You didn't need to know an agent. You didn't need to have gone to Cambridge. You could just get up in a pub with like-minded people and read your work. And that was a massively revolutionary thing for me. And it was about 2003, 2004 that I started doing a lot of those gigs. And then quite quickly I started running those gigs, because I had a connection with the library in Gateshead, as I was working part-time shifts on their talking newspaper, which was based in Gateshead Library, bizarrely. And the talking newspaper I loved, because you had to just research and write articles and then voice them onto tape cassette, old style. But I got talking to the reader development officer at the library, so someone very similar to what you do. And I was saying I wanted to get more people to come and do this amazing thing I'd discovered of performance poetry, which was a bit like stand-up comedy, but a lot friendlier. And she was like, oh, well, you could run a workshop, run an all-day workshop. And I was like, wow, we could then have a gig at the end. So I set that up. And one of the participants, she rang me up before the workshop, and she wanted to talk through it. She was a bit nervous. And her thing was she wanted to write plays, actually. And however, she discovered when she went along to the events at the Live Theatre where people read extracts of her work, she thought, oh, I could do it better than that. So she wanted to get more confidence in performing. Anyway, she just got divorced, and she was talking to me about that, and it was a big change in her life. And I was saying, oh, well, you know, we'll it's amazing the confidence you can get, even if you just have a day of doing these performance exercises, and we'll all be really friendly and we'll give you feedback. And so she came to the workshop and was one of the participants who to me stood out. They were all brilliant, but she got up and did this monologue about her divorce, and it was really funny. And she asked me after if I would sort of mentor her. And I was like, oh, because I didn't know that I had enough to offer her, really. But actually, she just wanted a bit of door opening into this world. As you will probably have heard of her, because her name is Sarah Millican, and she started off in the first workshop I ever ran, actually, which has given me a really strong belief in sometimes you just have to open doors for people, give them a platform, because it's not always easy to find, actually. Even now, is it? The route to becoming a writer can seem very difficult and very far away. You know, and actually, people assume, because I do a lot of radio work, I've been on radio for a lot, so it sounds like surely I must have an in to getting an agent and getting books published, but it's taken me years and years and years and years and years to I mean, I've actually got an agent now, and a publisher's offered to publish a book, and we're talking about it. Hurrah! But there's been a lot of wrong turns on the way, and that's another thing I'm very conscious of. If for those of us based in the north of England, we genuinely are further away from where stuff happens. We don't go to literary parties and bump into Tarquin, whose mate Oliver is looking for writers. That's not a thing. Well, maybe some of us do in Harrogate, I don't know. It's not a thing that's ever been in my life. So I'm always, I always think it's really important to let other people know that those doors are there, but at the same time to be a bit realistic about how hard it can be.
Yeah. But I think what I found, I don't know if you found this, but in the last few years, well, when I first started working in the library service, I didn't see many spoken word events. There weren't many poetry readings. There weren't many sort of, in pubs and stuff. And it seems like over the last few years, that's really grown. It's like people have organised their own, there's a lot more of that going on. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's not relying on some kind of, organizer and venue and things. It's actually, right, there's a pub, let's go do it. And I think it's brilliant. I know that in Bradford it's just really grown so much over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and it's really, and what you're then getting, and this has always been a real strength of performance poetry and spoken word as a form, suddenly you get this real variety and diversity of voices, and suddenly you get writers directly speaking their words who look a lot more like the great cross-section of people that you might find in Bradford and Keighley, and across the north. And that's fantastic. And actually, I think I could see sort of 15 years ago that was the potential, because that's what I found. That was my way in. And it's very much, as you say, it's just really taken off, which is great. And I think that maybe is it a downside? I don't know if it's a downside. Possibly now it's a bit more commercial as a form, so you now can get poets doing adverts, but maybe that's a good thing, kind of, depending what they're advertising, because at least then you can earn some money, and you slightly get the thing of, if you're a young attractive poet, you might, you're a bit more commercial, and I'm noticing that, because sod's law, I was young when I started. I was young then. I was a hip new thing, but I'm 45 now, so I'm not. But never mind. I'm the voice of experience. I'm the old hand who's been doing it, as Luke Wright reminded me. I met Luke. If you were to Google a picture of Luke, by the way, he would look exactly the same now as he did when he was 21. Wow. He reminded me that he met me when he and the poetry group he was in, Aisle 16, ran an open mic event in Edinburgh in a pub there called the Canonsgate Pub. And it was on something like a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the festival. And again, it was that openness. It was, come and sign up. You can do 5 minutes of whatever you want to do. And I remembered that Alan Carr was at the event. He came and did an open mic spot. And he was brilliant. I remember even then thinking, oh, he's very good. But Luke reminded me that the comedian Shazia Mirza was there as well. Oh, and not in very good taste, but whenever I bump into Shazia, we always talk about the Yorkshire Ripper, because she has a massive fascination with serial killers. And so if we ever have where are you from? Oh yeah, you're from Bradford. Oh, the Yorkshire Ripper. So we always have that conversation. And then the comedian Patrick Monaghan. And I just think, this again, something so open, both about stand-up comedy and performance poetry and spoken word. You just need a place to do it.
Yeah, you do. And I think a lot of you, I'm really pleased to see a lot of young people coming up now and seeing poetry as, it's a really good method for expressing yourself. And because for a while poetry had that reputation, didn't it? It was a bit fuddy-duddy, but now it's like come back again, hasn't it? It's kind of fashionable and edgy, and and I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest.
No, exactly. And I like being in the middle, and being in between. So having occasional moments where I can be like, oh look, I'm with the cool kids, and then because I'm actually not cool in any way, that's also fine. Because where I actually was with the other geeky kids,
Mm,
hanging out in the safety of a library somewhere,
mm,
being excited by writing and words. And actually, there's a lot of room, I think, in poetry and spoken word now for both things, because there's always been something about writing where writers tend to be outsiders in lots of ways, don't they? In order to write, you probably have the ability or need to detach and take a backwards view and look at life as an observer. You're not necessarily jumping full on in there. But at the same time, often in order to write, you kind of need to be part of life
mm,
rather than
mm,
far away in an ivory tower, not knowing what's going on. And again, for me, performance has always been a brilliant way to, like, I know more about the world through having watched open mic events, probably than almost anything else. Actually, it's like all life is there. Truly. Oh, you see, we're doing that thing though, aren't we? So we're on a Zoom chat,
mm.
and we're really talking with longing and nostalgia and also hope, I suppose, about how powerful it is, these live events, to open up doors. But of course, as we say, the combination of live and online,
Mm.
that's surely that's an amazing catalyst for
Brilliant.
people to start off and see things they would otherwise not see.
Mm. Mm.
So fingers crossed.
Right, well, I think we'll have to wrap this up now before I get told I'm out of time. So,
40-minute Zoom limit. Yes.
40 minutes.
No, 40-minute Zoom.
So we will look out for your book, your book coming out. And have you got another collection coming out soon, or is it?
Yes, section that's got those kind of distancey,
Yeah.
COVID-y, basically a fraught relationship poems in it. It's called The Oscillations, and it's coming out from Nine Arches Press, probably
Right.
next February. Nine Arches are brilliant, actually. They're not one of the bigger presses, but actually they're quite big as a poetry press, and their poets seem to be everywhere. And Jane Kermain, who runs it, is brilliant at editing. I've never had that before as a poet. Someone sitting down with my poem saying, right, too many words here, or what was it you really wanted to say? And that's been a wonderful process. So yes, those two things are happening, and subject to theatres being open, I'll probably be touring my Northern Women's show, Where There's Muck There's Bras, again, and the Bigger on the Inside show about Doctor Who and autism. Oh, and I didn't even mention I'm writing a play about an imagined meeting between Ted Hughes and Bernard Manning as for the Ted Hughes Festival, and that has been occupying me as well during lockdown. So we just need to work out where to put that. So I've been busy, haven't I, really?
You've been very busy. All sounds amazing. It all sounds amazing. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this, and we hope to see you again. We'd love to have you back in the library for an event.
Real life with real people, not
Oh, that'll be lovely. Yeah. Yeah.
my hug. I'll get overexcited and hug. Someone elbow bumped me at this BBC festival. I was like, let's not make
The same. Yeah, I do this. I do lots of virtual kind of.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
You still gets that urge, doesn't it, to encircle
Yeah,
something else.
it does. Yeah. Oh, we'll get back there. We'll get back there, I'm sure.
Oh, we will, and yeah,
Yeah.
combine with stuff, we'll be unstoppable.
Yeah. So thank you very much. This is brilliant, and it will be going out next week during National Libraries Week, so that'd be really good. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.